Cap and trade is a mechanism for pricing carbon. It is also a mechanism for imposing limits on how much carbon the companies that are covered by the cap and trade system can emit. So it's a combination of a carbon pricing and a regulatory limit. It does, in theory, generate revenues. What you do with the revenue is an open question. In some cases, those revenues are rebated back to taxpayers. In other cases, we're doing it in Ontario, and indeed is being done in Quebec and California. Those revenues are actually invested in low carbon transitions. So for example, public transit projects and energy efficiency projects. And in Ontario's case, that in particular makes a lot of sense because most of the greenhouse gas emissions don't come from industry. They come from buildings and from transportation. So those sorts of things will require investments in new infrastructure. At worst, a reduction in economic growth, a few fractions of a percentage point less than it otherwise would have been. So the net economic impact in worst case scenarios is very minor. And the counter argument, of course, is that the world is moving in a low carbon direction. And making investments in those sorts of technologies and services associated with that kind of economy is actually how you position yourself competitively in the long term. In the short term, there would be some very minor reductions in certain prices. I mean, we're talking a few cents per liter on gasoline, potentially, a little bit principally on natural gas for space heating in the wintertime. Very, very marginal impacts.
So the Canadian wouldn't actually feel it?
I don't think you're going to feel very much. You weren't going to feel very much in the first place as a result of there being a cap and trade system. Mm-hmm. So I think the impact of getting rid of it actually is really quite, in the short term, be relatively unnoticeable. What you have to worry about is in the long term, and in effect we're throwing in the towel on trying to deal with climate change. That will come back and bite us in the long term. And I said also, if we're sending this signal that we're out of the game in terms of technological transitions around low carbon technologies, that doesn't help us in the long term either, because other people are moving into that space, and that's where a lot of economic innovation is going to happen. And in effect, between getting rid of cap and trade, canceling renewable energy projects, a number of other things, in effect, the government of Ontario is saying we don't want anything to do with that. We don't want to be at the technological forefront of energy transitions in the world. We seem to want to stick our head in the sand and do nothing. That's not a good long-term strategy, particularly in a world with very, very dynamic developments, especially around energy.